The massive crystalline dome of the Galactic Coalition headquarters stretched across 3 kilometers of artificial atmosphere, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that translated the emotions of 1,000 different species. Today, those patterns blazed with mockery and contempt. Supreme Commander Thackrus lounged in his hover throne like a grotesque emperor, his 8 tentacles draped lazily over the armrests. Each tentacle was thicker than a human torso, covered in scales that shifted color with his mood, currently a deep purple that meant amusement bordering on cruelty. His 3 eyes, ranged in a triangle on his bulbous head, focused on the holographic displays floating before the assembled delegates. "Look at this," he wheezed, his voice a wet, bubbling sound that the universal translator struggled to convert into something resembling speech. "The humans have built orbital platforms. Orbital platforms, how quaint. My hatchlings play with more sophisticated toys." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien laughter. The Zephyrian delegates buzzed their wing cases in rapid clicks that sounded like machine gun fire. The crystalline Altarians chimed in harmonious tones that would have been beautiful if not for their mocking undertones. Even the usually stoic Kepler collective cybernetic representatives emitted static bursts that passed for amusement among their kind. Ambassador Lee Minho stood at the center of it all, a single human figure surrounded by creatures that defied imagination. His black diplomatic suit was pressed to perfection, but sweat had begun to bead on his forehead despite the chamber's climate control. He'd served as Earth's ambassador for 3 years, but he'd never faced hostility this naked, this casual. To his right, a Velderon delegate resembling a massive praying mantis clicked its mandibles in what passed for laughter among its species. Its compound eyes reflected the holographic displays showing Earth's defense grid's nuclear silos, space-based weapons platforms, and the pride of humanity's fleet, 300 warships ranging from corvettes to the massive dreadnought souls. "Pride, primitive doesn't begin to describe it," hissed Fleet Admiral Zerthik, rising from his position near the command console. He was a Saurian, evolved from predators that had once hunted in the swamps of his homeworld. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide was a patchwork of battle scars, and his elongated skull housed a brain that had orchestrated the conquest of 17 star systems. "I've seen asteroid miners with better defenses." The holographic display shifted, showing a comparison chart that made humanity's achievements look pathetic. Earth's largest warship, massing 800,000 tons, appeared as a tiny dot next to the Coalition's standard dreadnought, a 50-million-ton monster bristling with weapons that could crack plow. "Nets, esteemed leaders," Minho began, his voice carefully controlled despite the tremor in his hands. "I respectfully urge you to reconsider your assessment. Earth's defensive capabilities extend beyond what your intelligence reports suggest." The laughter grew louder, more vicious. A delegate from the hegemonious species that looked like a cross between a spider and a shadow spoke in a voice like grinding glass. "What could you possibly hide from us, mammal? Our sensor networks span the galaxy. We know exactly how many ships you have, how many missiles, how many soldiers. You are children playing with sticks." Minho's jaw tightened. He'd expected skepticism, even hostility, but this level of casual dismissal felt like a slap in the face. "You don't understand the full picture. We have defensive protocols that... protocols." Thackrus's tentacles riffed faster, a sign of growing amusement. "Oh, this is rich. The humans have protocols. Tell me, little ambassador, do these protocols involve throwing your nuclear toys at our shields? Because I should mention our weakest scout ship could absorb your entire nuclear arsenal and use it to power the coffee makers." The chamber buzzed with renewed laughter. A crystalline delegate's voice chimed like breaking glass. "Perhaps they plan to ram their ships into us Such a wonderfully primitive solution, actually, added a Zephyrian, its wing cases rattling with mirth. Their largest weapons are chemical explosives. Chemical. We stopped using those for anything at mining operations 6,000 years ago. Minho felt heat rising in his cheeks. 3 years of diplomatic training, 3 years of careful relationship building, and it was all crumbling because these aliens couldn't see past their own arrogance. You're making a mistake. Earth has capabilities you haven't accounted for. Silence. Vakros Esbello shook the chamber, his tentacles slamming down on his throne's armrests with enough force to crack the crystal. Your refusal to accept coalition protection is not just foolish, it's insulting. We offer you the chance to join the galaxy's greatest alliance, to benefit from technologies beyond your wildest dreams, and you respond with this embarrassing display of false bravado. The Supreme Commander's eyes narrowed, focusing on Minho with predatory intensity. You want to play at being equals? Fine. We'll show the galaxy exactly what happens when primitives refuse wisdom. He turned to Admiral Zerthik, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. Prepare the demonstration force. 200 ships should be sufficient to make the point. Make sure the encounter is broadcast across all networks. Let every species see. What happens to those who overestimate themselves? Zerthik's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. Should we prepare for orbital bombardment, Supreme Commander? No. No. Nothing so crude. We're not barbarians. Vakros' tentacles curled with sadistic pleasure. Simply demonstrate our superiority, disable their defenses, capture their leadership, and broadcast their surrender. Let it be a lesson that echoes across the galaxy. As the session began to dissolve into excited chatter about the upcoming spectacle, Minho stepped back into the shadows near the chamber's edge. His hand found the quantum communicator hidden in his jacket, a device no larger than a coin, but capable of instantaneous communication across any distance. Soul control. This is Ambassador Minho, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the alien conversations. They're coming. Full demonstration force. 200 vessels. They want to make an example of us. The response crackled through his earpiece immediately. Understood. Ambassador, stand by for orders from the director. Seconds passed. Round him, the aliens continued their celebrations. Already planning viewing parties for what they assumed would be humanity's humiliation. Some were placing bets on how long Earth's defenses would last. The consensus seemed to be less than an hour. Finally, a new voice came through the communicator comm. Professional. With the slight accent that martyrs coming from Earth's Eastern Territories. This is Director Park Soman. Ambassador, what's your assessment of their intent? Minho glanced round the chamber, watching a species that had never agreed on anything united in their anticipation of humanity's defeat. They want to crush us publicly. Director, this isn't about conquest, it's about humiliation. They want to broadcast our surrender to every world in the galaxy. A pause. Then, copy that, Ambassador. Continue your mission. Maintain diplomatic protocols until the situation develops. And Ambassador, yes, Director, tell them we said thank you for the advance warning. It's been a while since we've had a proper field test. The communicator went silent, leaving Minho alone among the aliens who had just signed their own death warrant. He straightened his tie, smoothed his jacket, and walked back toward the main group. There was still diplomacy to be done, even if none of these creatures realized they were about to learn why humanity had survived on a world where everything tried to kill them. As he rejoined the crowd, Supreme Commander Thakros noticed his return. The human returns. I hope you use that time to compose a surrender message. You'll need it soon enough. Minho smiled politely. his diplomatic training taking over even as anticipation built in his chest. Actually, Supreme Commander, I was sending a message to my government. They asked me to thank you. Thank us. One of Thacros's tentacles post midriff. For what? For the opportunity to show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of. The void beyond Neptune's orbit rippled like disturbed water as reality itself bent and twisted. Space-time folded in on itself, creating a whirlpool of distorted light and crackling energy. Then, with a sound that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space, but somehow echoed through every hull and bone in the solar system, 200 Veltharian warships materialized at Earth's heliopause. The fleet spread across thousands of kilometers in perfect geometric formation, each vessel a masterpiece of alien engineering. The smallest scout ships dwarfed Earth's largest cruisers, while the dreadnoughts at the formation's heart looked like floating cities carved from black metal and pulsing with veins of crimson energy. Their hulls bore the scars of a dozen conquered worlds, and weapon ports glowed with barely contained power. Admiral Zerthik stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Deathclaw, his skilled hands gripping the command rail as he surveyed the primitive solar system spread before him. His reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. Behind him, his bridge crew, a mix of Saurians, Veltarans, and cybernetic hybrids, monitored their instruments with professional efficiency. All ships report ready, Admiral, his tactical officer announced, her voice a mechanical rasp through her cybernetic vocal cords. Sensor sweeps confirm human fleet positions. They're exactly where our intelligence predicted. Zerthik S-foot, tongue flaked out, tasting the recycled air of his bridge. It carried the scent of ozone and fear, though whose fear he couldn't say. Open channels to all frequencies. Let's give these mammals a chance to surrender before we crush them. The communication ray hummed to life, broadcasting across every radio, quantum, and subspace frequency known to galactic civilization. When Zerthik spoke, his words reached every human device capable of receiving them, from military command centers to children's tablets. Humans of Earth. His voice boomed across the void, translated into dozens of Earth languages simultaneously. I am Admiral Zerthik of the Veltharian Imperial Fleet. You stand before the might of 200 warships, each one capable of reducing your cities to glass. Witness the futility of resistance. Your technology is primitive, your weapons obsolete, your courage meaningless against our superiority. The response came not from Earth's political leaders or military high command, but from a single human voice cutting through the static with surprising clarity. The voice belonged to Captain Kim Tae-young, speaking from the bridge of the UES Incheon, Earth's newest battleship currently leading a patrol group near Mars orbit. Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Terran space as defined by the Sol System Sovereignty Declaration. Withdraw immediately or face defensive action. Zerthik's mandibles clicked together rapidly, the saurian equivalent of laughter, round his bridge. Other officers joined in with their own species' expressions of amusement. The tactical display showed the human fleet's positions, scattered groups of small vessels, none larger than 800,000 tons. Many clearly converted civilian ships pressed into military service. Defensive action. Zerthik's voice dripped with contempt. Little human, your largest ships are insects compared to our might. My flagship alone masses more than your entire fleet combined. Surrender now. Submit to coalition authority, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will make your world's conquest a lesson that echoes across the galaxy for 10,000 years. There was a pause. Then Captain Kim's voice returned, steady and completely unimpressed. Negative. All units, engage Pattern 7. Execute immediately. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come if any of those academies survived what was about to unfold. The human fleet didn't retreat. They didn't try to negotiate. They didn't even attempt the traditional formation fighting that had characterized galactic warfare for millennia. Instead, they attacked with a coordination and ferocity that defied every tactical manual ever written. 3 human destroyers, each barely a thousandth, the mass of a Veltharian cruiser, accelerated directly toward the alien formation at maximum burn. Their crews had to be pulling 12, maybe 15 gravities, enough to turn unprotected humans into paste against their bulkheads. But somehow they maintained perfect formation. Their missiles launching in precisely timed volleys that overwhelmed point defenses through sheer mathematical precision. Impossible, breathed Zerthak S. sensor operator, a multi-armed creature whose species had evolved specifically for information processing. They're coordinating across light minutes of distance, with zero communication lag. How are they? His words were cut off as the first human destroyer, the Hughes Bison, slammed into a Veltharian heavy cruiser at 17% of light speed. The impact released more energy than most stellar weapons, and the cruiser simply vanished in a brief, brilliant star that faded to leave only expanding plasma. But the humans weren't done. Captain Choi Ji-won's destroyer, the Hughes Gwangju, had taken massive damage from defensive fire. Her hull was breached in a dozen places, her crew dying from radiation exposure, but she maintained a course toward the formation's heart. Her final transmission cut across all frequencies, her voice clear despite the chaos surrounding her. For Earth, for humanity, remember us. The Gwangju rammed straight through the bridge tower of a Veltharian battlecruiser, her antimatter reactor detonating in a controlled cascade that turned both ships into a miniature supernova. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from Earth's surface as a new star in the constellation Draco. Admiral Zerthak gripped his command rail so hard his claws left gouges in the metal. This wasn't warfare as the galaxy understood it. Civilized species fought with calculated precision, minimizing losses, seeking advantage through superior technology and tactics. These humans were fighting like cornered predators, using their own deaths as weapons. Sir, his communications officer's voice cracked with something that might have been fear. Multiple human vessels are broadcasting some kind of countdown. Sequence, 15 seconds and decreasing. Countdown to what? Zerthak demanded. Unknown. Sir, it's not in any standard format. Wait time picking up massive energy signatures from the inner system. Multiple sources, all accelerating toward our position. On the tactical display, new contacts appeared like angry red dots swarming out from behind Earth's moon. Not ships, these signatures were too small, too fast. Missiles, but moving at velocities that should have been impossible for a chemical or even nuclear propulsion. The first wave of human long-range missiles struck the Veltharian formation exactly 15 seconds. After the countdown ended, each missile was the size of a small shuttle, but they hit with the force of tactical nuclear weapons. Worse, they seemed to know exactly where to strike, targeting sensor arrays, communication relays, weapon emplacements with surgical precision. How are they doing this? Zerthak's tactical officer shouted over the alarms that were now blaring throughout the bridge. Their guidance systems shouldn't be able to track us at this range. The answer came in the form of Captain Kim Tae-hun's voice, still broadcasting from the Incheon as his ship led a charge directly into the enemy formation's flank. Admiral Zerthak, you made one critical error in your intelligence assessment. You assumed our ships were designed to fight other ships. The UES Incheon's main batteries opened fire not at the Veltharian vessels, but at the space between them. Each shot released clouds of metallic particles that expanded rapidly, creating interference fields that disrupted alien sensors and communications. Within minutes, the perfect Veltharian formation dissolved into chaos as individual ships lost contact with their command structure. They're not trying to destroy us. Zervik realized with growing horror. They're trying to isolate us, break our coordination. His flagship shuddered as a concentrated missile barrage struck its shields, the weapons that weren't the crude nuclear devices his intelligence had predicted, but sophisticated antimatter warheads that seemed to adapt their explosion patterns to maximize damage against Velvarian shield technology. Sir, his sensor operator's voice had climbed to a near shriek. I'm detecting another transmission from the inner system. Same source as before. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, professional, with the slight accent that marked its speaker as coming from Earth's eastern territories. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, suggesting an education and preparation that contradicted everything the Coalition thought they knew about humanity. Director Park Suman to all Earth forces. Olympus Protocol is authorized. Titan 1 is inbound. All vessels execute immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance of 1 million kilometers. Acknowledge. Captain Kim's response came immediately. Acknowledged. Director. All units. Pattern 7 complete. Executing emergency burn to safe distance as 1. The surviving human ships broke off their attacks and began accelerating away from the Velvarian formation at velocities that should have liquefied their crews. They moved with the same impossible coordination they'd shown throughout the battle, suggesting communication and control systems far beyond what galactic intelligence had detected. Zervik's sensor operator was now openly panicking, his multiple arms flailing as he tried to process the readings flooding his console. Admiral, I'm detecting a massive object approaching from the outer system. Mass readings are beyond anything in our databases. It's impossible. Nothing that large should be able to move that fast. Through the chaos of his damaged bridge, Admiral Zerthik felt the first cold touch of genuine fear. These humans hadn't been trying to win the battle they'd been buying. Time. The question that now burned in his mind was simple and terrifying. Time for what? The answer was coming, and space itself seemed to hold its breath as something vast and terrible approached from the darkness beyond the outer planets. The fabric of reality rippled like water disturbed by a stone. Stars flickered and danced as space-time itself groaned under an impossible strain. Beyond Neptune's frozen orbit, where the solar system faded into the endless black, something vast was coming. The first sign was gravitational. Every sensitive instrument in the solar system suddenly went haywire as local space began to warp and twist. On Earth, seismographs registered phantom earthquakes. On Mars, the polar ice caps shifted slightly as the planet's orbit wobbled by. Micrometers, even the gas giant's moon, felt the pull of something massive approaching from the outer dark. Then came the light dot. It wasn't the clean flash of a ship dropping out of hyperspace. This was different, a slow, building glow that seemed to emerge from nothingness itself. The darkness between stars began to shimmer like heat waves rising from some asphalt. Colors that had no names in any galactic language painted themselves across the void, and space itself seemed to hold its breath. The UES Titan didn't so much arrive as it did unfold into existence. One moment there was empty space beyond Neptune. The next moment there was a structure so vast it defied the mind's ability to process it. The construct stretched across hundreds of kilometers, its hull a seamless fusion of materials that shouldn't exist, metals that absorbed light completely, creating patches of absolute darkness, and sections that gleamed with an inner fire that had nothing to do with reflected starlight. Admiral Zerthik's sensor operator had stopped speaking entirely. His multiple arms hung limp at his sides as his instruments registered readings that made no sense. Mass readings fluctuated between impossible and incomprehensible. Energy signatures, peaked and valleys suggested technology that operated on principles unknown to galactic science by the ancient spawning grounds, whispered a Velteron officer, his compound eyes reflecting the impossible sight. What manner of creature builds such things? The Titan's hull-bore markings that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Ancient Korean characters' Hangul scripts that glowed with soft blue light ran along its flanks in neat, precise rows. But these weren't just decorations. As the alien observers watched in growing horror, they realized the characters were actually part of the ship's structure, integrated into its very being like the scales of some cosmic serpent weapon. Ports began opening along the Titan's surface, not the crude gun ports that most galactic vessels used, but apertures that seemed to unfold from the hull itself like flowers blooming in fast forward. Each opening revealed depths that seemed to extend impossibly far into the ship's interior, as if the vessel was somehow larger inside than outside. On the Titan's bridge, Director Park Suman stood before a display wall that curved around nearly the entire command center. The screens showed tactical information that would have overwhelmed most species, millions of data points updating in real time, tracking everything from individual atoms to the gravitational effects of distant stars. But Park absorbed it all, with the calm focus of someone who had trained her entire life for this moment. She was a small woman by human standards, barely reaching 5.5 feet in height, with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was plain, unmarked by the medals and ribbons that adorned most galactic military leaders, but when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made hardened veterans twice her size listen without question. "Weapons Officer Lee Doyen," she said, her tone as casual as if she were ordering coffee. "Bring all primary systems online. Full spectrum analysis of hostile forces. Navigation Officer Seodesu. Set course for Earth orbit. Maximum sublight. Velocity." "Aye, Director," came the crisp responses from her bridge crew. Unlike the mixed species crews common on coalition vessels, every person on the Titan's bridge was human. They moved with a precision and coordination that suggested not just training, but a level of integration between human and machine that bordered on the supernatural. Commander Yoon Woo-young, the Titan's executive officer, stepped up beside Park at the main display. He was younger than his director, perhaps in his early 30s, with the kind of calm demeanor that came from knowing exactly what he was capable of. "Director, I'm showing all human fleet elements withdrawing to minimum. Safe distance. Enemy forces are maintaining formation, but their communications are chaotic. They appear to be in shock." Park nodded, watching as tactical displays tracked the retreating human vessels. Each ship glowed green on her screen. Safe, functional, crews intact. The sight of Captain Kim Tae-young's battered, but still operational, Incheon brought a slight smile to her lips. The man had exceeded even her expectations, and that was saying something. "Energy readings, Doyen?" she asked. "All systems nominal. Director, gravitational field generators at optimal efficiency. Weapon systems are cycling up to full power. Estimated time to maximum readiness, 47 seconds, 47 seconds. Park had spent 15 years overseeing the Titan's construction, another 5 years training its crew, and countless hours running simulations of this exact scenario. But now that the moment had arrived, 47 seconds felt like an eternity. The main display shifted to show the Veltharian formation. 200 ships ranged in perfect geometric patterns, their hulls scarred by the human fleet's desperate attacks, but still largely intact. At the formation's heart, the flagship Deathclaw hung like a metallic predator, its weapons trained on the approaching Titan. Admiral Zerthak's voice crackled across all frequencies, his earlier confidence replaced by something that might have been panic. "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Zerthak of the Veltharian Imperial Fleet. You will halt your approach and submit to inspection. Any aggressive actions will be met with the full force of coalition military might." Park's smile widened. She gestured to her communications officer. A young woman whose fingers danced across control surfaces that seemed to respond to her thoughts. As much as her touch, open a channel, all frequencies, maximum power. Make sure every ship in their fleet hears this. The channel opened with a soft chime when Park spoke. Her words carried across space with crystal clarity, translated simultaneously into every major galactic language. I am Director Park, Suman of the Terran Defense Directorate, Admiral Zerthik. You have violated sovereign space, attacked our patrol vessels, and threatened civilian populations. This constitutes an act of war under the Galactic Conflict Protocols. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces immediately. Zerthik's response came immediately, his reptilian pride overriding whatever tactical sense he might have possessed. You dare threaten the Veltharian Empire. We have 200 warships. Your single vessel, no matter how large, cannot stand against the might of a coalition fleet. We have one Titan class, Park replied, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. That is sufficient. She turned to her weapons officer. Doyen, target the cruiser Bloodfang, third rank, port side of their formation, demonstrate weapon system Alpha, target acquired, Director. Weapon system Alpha charged and ready. Park nodded once. Fire. Deep within the Titan superstructure, machinery that had taken humanity's greatest minds 20 years to design came online. The gravitational manipulator was a device the size of a city block, its core containing technology that bent the fundamental forces of the universe to humanity's will. It drew power from the quantum foam itself, tapping into the zero-point energy that permeated all of space. The weapon fired without sound, without flash, without any of the dramatic effects that characterized most galactic weapons. There was simply a moment when the Veltharian cruiser Bloodfang existed, and then a moment when it did not. Space twisted round the target vessel like a lens-focusing light. Reality folded in on itself, creating a bubble of distorted space-time that contracted rapidly toward a single point. The cruiser 8 million tons of armor and weapons that had conquered a dozen worlds was compressed into something smaller, than an atom, then smaller still, until it simply ceased to be part of the universe. Where the Bloodfang had been, there was now only empty space, not debris, not energy, not even radiation. The ship had been edited out of existence as cleanly as erasing a word from a document. On the bridge of the Deathclaw, Admiral Zerthik stared at his tactical display in absolute incomprehension. The Bloodfang's icon had simply vanished. No explosion, no distress signal, no final transmission. One moment it was there, the next it was not. Sensor readings, he croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. His sensor operator was openly weeping now, a clear fluid streaming from his compound eyes. Nothing, sir. No debris, no energy signature, no gravitational disturbance. It's as if the ship never existed. Round the bridge, crew members from a dozen different species stared at their instruments in growing horror. Some were praying to gods whose names hadn't been spoken in millennia. Others were trying to calculate how to surrender to beings capable of such power. But Zerthik could only stare at the impossible human vessel hanging in space before his fleet, its weapon ports glowing with the promise of annihilation, and realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe had just been proven wrong. The silence that followed the Bloodfang's erasure stretched for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Admiral Zerthik's voice exploded across the communication channels, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking under the weight of what he'd just witnessed. Impossible, he roared, his reptilian throat producing sounds that the universal translator struggled to convert into coherent speech. No technology in the galaxy can simply delete matter from existence. Our sensors would have detected gravitational collapse energy discharge, something. His words died in his throat as the Titan began to transform before his eyes. What had appeared to be a smooth, seamless hull suddenly erupted with activity. Thousands of previously invisible panels slid open across the massive vessel surface, revealing weapon emplacements that defied conventional understanding of ship design. The defensive turrets that emerged weren't the crude, bulky installations found on most galactic warships. These were elegant, almost organic-looking constructs that seemed to flow from the Titan's hull like metallic flowers blooming in fast forward. Each turret was no larger than a human fighter craft. But they emerged in vast numbers, hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands, until the Titan's surface crawled with defensive systems like a living organism covered in scales. "By the seven hells," whispered Zerthaka's tactical officer, a cybernetic hybrid whose enhanced brain processed information faster than most organic minds. "I'm counting over 50,000 individual weapon systems. The targeting resolution alone should be impossible to coordinate. But the Titan's point defense grid operated with a precision that made mockery of galactic military doctrine. Each turret tracked independently while remaining perfectly coordinated with its neighbors, creating overlapping fields of fire that could engage targets ranging from capital ships down to individual ISLs. The system's effective range exceeded a full light-second, meaning it could accurately target and destroy objects at distances where light itself took over a second to travel. Squadron leader Vextel, commanding a wing of Veltharian strike fighters, had been preparing for a bombing run when the blood vanished. Now, watching the Titan's defensive systems deploy, he felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. But orders were orders, and the Veltharian military did not tolerate cowardice. Deathwing. "This is lead," he transmitted to his squadron. "Target that monster's weapon systems. We can't let it." The rest of his words were lost as the Titan's point defenses opened fire. There was no warning, no targeting locks, no defensive posturing. One moment 24 elite fighters were streaking toward the human vessel at maximum velocity. The next moment they were simply gone, erased by energy beams so precise they could have threaded needles at interplanetary distances. The destruction was so complete that it took several seconds for the sensors to register what had happened. 24 of the Veltharian Empire's finest pilots, each flying a fighter worth more than most planets' annual budgets, had been eliminated in less than a second by a defensive system that fired once per target and never missed. On the Titan's bridge, Tactical Officer Kim Hyunjin watched the engagement with professional detachment. His console displayed threat assessments, targeting solutions, and damage reports in real time, but his attention was focused on the larger tactical picture. The young officer had trained for this moment his entire adult life, and now that it had arrived, he felt only a calm certainty that humanity was finally showing the galaxy what they were truly capable of. "Director," he reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what was unfolding round them. "Enemy forces are beginning to break formation. Multiple vessels are attempting to disengage and retreat to jump distance. Should we allow them to withdraw?" Director Park Suman stood at the center of the bridge like the eye of a hurricane, her calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos visible on the external displays. She consulted her tactical screens with the same methodical precision she'd shown throughout the engagement, analyzing threat vectors and strategic options with the mind of someone who had spent decades preparing for this exact scenario. "Negative," she said finally, her voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "They came here to demonstrate their superiority over humanity. Let them complete their demonstration." She gestured to her science officer, Xiangman. "Deploy the interdiction field, full sphere. Maximum range." Science officer Yoon Xiangman's fingers danced across his console. activating systems that had been theoretical concepts just a generation ago. Quantum interdiction field deploying now. Director. Effective radius expanding to 5 astronomical units and stabilizing. No vessel within the field perimeter will be able to achieve faster-than-light velocities. The effect was invisible to the naked eye, but every ship in the Veltharian fleet felt it immediately. Their hyperspace drive suddenly registered as offline. Their jump calculations returned impossible results, and their navigation systems began displaying error messages in languages that hadn't been used for centuries. The Titan had essentially turned local space into a trap, preventing any vessel from escaping until the field was deactivated. Admiral Zerthik felt the blood drain from his face as his navigation officer confirmed what he already suspected. Sir, hyperspace engines are completely non-functional. Whatever they're doing, it's preventing us from jumping to light speed. We're trapped. The Admiral's mind raced through tactical options. But every scenario led to the same conclusion. His fleet was caught in open space, unable to retreat, facing an enemy whose capabilities exceeded anything in the galactic databases. There was only one option left: attack with everything they had and hope that overwhelming firepower could penetrate whatever defenses the humans possessed, all ships. He broadcast on the fleet command frequency. Concentrate all fire on the human vessel, every weapon, every missile, everything we have. If we're going to die here, let's at least take that abomination with us. The response was immediate and devastating. 200 Veltharian warships opened fire simultaneously, their combined firepower sufficient to crack the crust of a planet. Plasmic cannons, particle beams, antimatter torpedoes, and exotic energy. Weapons converged on the Titan in a display of destructive force that lit up the solar system like a second sun. The attack should have been enough to vaporize any vessel ever constructed. Instead, something impossible happened. The energy weapons simply bent round the Titan's hull, flowing like water round a stone. Kinetic projectiles slowed to drifting meteors that harmless bounced off the ship's surface. Antimatter warheads detonated prematurely, their explosions contained by invisible barriers that prevented any damage to the target. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't that the Titan was undamaged, it was that it seemed to be absorbing the attack's energy. The ship's hull began to glow with a soft, pulsing light, and energy readings spiked as the vessel's power systems fed off the incoming fire like a predator consuming prey. Fascinating, murmured Science Officer Yoon Seungmin, his voice filled with the quiet satisfaction of a researcher whose theories had just been proven correct. Their weapons are actually feeding our power grid. Current output is at 112% of baseline capacity. We could maintain this level of defensive activity indefinitely. Park nodded, unsurprised by the results. The Titan had been designed specifically to counter every known form of galactic weaponry, using their own attacks against them. But now it was time to end this demonstration and show the galaxy what happened when humanity stopped playing defense. Doyen, she said, turning to her weapons officer. Activate the gravitational web. Maximum dispersion. Let's show them what happens when physics becomes a weapon. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Space round the Veltharian fleet suddenly became thick, viscous, as if the vacuum itself had transformed into some kind of invisible fluid. Ships that had been maneuvering at high velocity found themselves slowing to a crawl. Weapon systems that had been cycling at maximum rate began operating in slow motion. Even the crew's movements became sluggish as the local gravitational field increased to levels that made every action require enormous effort. "What's happening to us?" screamed a Veltoron captain, his voice distorted by the communication lag that the gravitational field was causing. "Our engines are at full power, but we're barely moving." The Titan had weaponized gravity itself. turning the fundamental force that held the universe together into a trap that made resistance impossible. The Velverian fleet found themselves caught like insects in amber. Their movements reduced to a fraction of normal speed while their life support systems strained against the invisible pressure that grounded them. It was then that Admiral Zerthik finally understood the true horror of his situation. The humans hadn't just built a bigger ship or developed better weapons. They had rewritten the laws of physics themselves, turning the very fabric of space-time into a weapon that could trap and destroy enemies without ever firing a shot. "We surrender," he broadcast, his voice cracking with desperation. "Please, we surrender. We withdraw our claim on this system. We'll leave immediately." Director Park's response came back immediately, her voice carrying the cold finality of absolute judgment. "Too late. Admiral, you had your chance to withdraw peacefully. You chose to attack our forces, threaten our people, and demonstrate your superiority. Now you'll experience what human superiority looks like." She turned to her weapons officer, her expression never changing from its calm professionalism. "Doyen, full activation of the stellar forgery. Show them what human engineering can accomplish when we decide to stop holding back." The secondary weapons that emerged from the Titan's hull were beyond anything the galactic community had ever imagined. These weren't just weapons, they were industrial tools capable of manipulating matter at the subatomic level, reshaping asteroids into ammunition, and converting more energy into any element on the periodic table. When they fired, they didn't just destroy targets, they rebuilt them into something else entirely. The barrage that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Ships were transformed into clouds of component atoms, then rebuilt into perfect spheres of inert matter. Weapons were restructured at the molecular level, their exotic materials converted into harmless carbon and silicon. Entire vessels were disassembled and reassembled as geometric sculptures that drifted through space like abstract art. When the demonstration finally ended, only debris and Admiral Zerthik's heavily damaged flagship remained of the once mighty Velverian fleet. The Deathclaw hung in space like a broken toy, its hull cracked and twisted, its crew barely alive in the few pressurized sections that remained intact. The galaxy had just witnessed the birth of a new apex predator, and its name was humanity. The emergency session bells had been ringing for 3 straight weeks across every major world in the galaxy. From the crystal spires of Altaria Prime to the underground warrens of the Kepler Collective, the same conversations were happening in a dozen different languages. But they all centered on one terrifying question. What do we do about the humans in the deepest chambers of Veltharian High Command, beneath layers of security that had protected Imperial secrets for 1,000 years? Admiral Zerthik sat in chains before a tribunal of his superiors. The once proud warrior who had conquered 17 star systems now looked like a broken shell of his former self. His scales had dulled to a sickly grey, and his hands shook whenever he tried to speak. Supreme Overlord Kethma loomed over the disgraced admiral like a mountain of muscle and fury. His species had evolved from pack hunters, and right now every instinct in his body was screaming for blood. "Explain to me," he growled, his voice echoing through the chamber, "how you managed to lose 200 of our finest warships to a single enemy vessel. 200 ships, Admiral. That's more than we lost in the entire Centauri War." Zerthik's voice came out as barely a whisper, forcing the tribunal to lean forward to hear him. "It wasn't a ship, Supreme Overlord, not in any sense that we understand. It was like trying to fight a force of nature, a mobile fortress that bent reality to its will." "Stop speaking in riddles," snarled General Dexcall, whose cybernetic implants sparked with barely contained rage. "Ships are metal and energy. Weapons are physics and chemistry. There's no such thing as magic. Their technology is centuries beyond us, Zerthik continued, his eyes staring at something only he could see. Maybe millennia. They turned our own weapons against us, made space itself into a trap. And when they fired back, he shuddered. They didn't just destroy ships, they erased them, made them stop existing. And the worst part, the tribunal waited in tense silence. It's not their only one. Before they let me escape, I heard transmissions, references to other Titans, multiple vessels of the same class. We attacked what we thought was their ultimate weapon, and it turned out to be just one ship in a fleet we never even knew existed. Halfway across the galaxy, on a world that most galactic databases still listed as primitive backwater. Director Park Suman stood in a command center that would have made the Coalition's best military. Architects weep with envy. The facility, stretched for kilometers beneath the Korean peninsula, its walls lined with displays showing construction projects that defied conventional understanding of engineering. 7 massive shapes hung in orbital shipyards that hadn't existed a month ago. Each one was a Titan-class vessel in various stages of completion, their hulls growing like living things as automated systems added layer upon layer of impossible technology. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, a glimpse of humanity's true industrial capacity unleashed for the first time in centuries. Colonel Namjuyuk approached with a data pad filled with reports from across the galaxy. He was a compact man with graying hair and the kind of steady demeanor that came from decades of keeping humanity's greatest secrets. Director, the intelligence reports are flooding in. Every major power wants to talk. The Altarian Republic is offering a formal military alliance. The Centauri Confederation wants immediate technology exchanges. Even the Zephyrian Empire is hinting at territorial concessions. Park nodded, unsurprised by the response. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the galaxy had just learned that humanity wasn't the helpless species they'd assumed. What about the Coalition leadership? Panic. Juyuk said simply, "Our agents report emergency. Sessions running round the clock. Half their military command wants to attempt a preemptive strike before we can complete more Titans. The other half is pushing for immediate peace negotiations. There's serious talk of offering us a permanent seat on the Galactic Council." A smile played at the corners of Park's mouth. After decades of careful planning and patient preparation, humanity was finally being taken seriously. Let them debate. Fear makes for poor decision-making. And we can use that to our advantage. How long until Titan II is operational? 6 months. Ma'am, the quantum foundries are actually ahead of schedule. The AI learning protocols we developed are improving construction efficiency by the day. At current rates, we'll have all 7 vessels completed within 2 years. Park had spent her entire adult life working toward this moment, and now it was almost within reach. 7 Titan-class vessels would be enough to reshape the galactic balance of power permanently. Not through conquest humanity had learned from observing other species' mistakes, but through the simple reality that no force in the galaxy could stand against them. Meanwhile, in the crystalline halls where it had all begun, Ambassador Lee Minho stood once again before the Galactic Coalition, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where once there had been laughter and mockery, now there was respectful silence. The alien delegates who had dismissed humanity as primitive now hung on his every word like students before a master. The holographic displays that had once shown Earth's crude defenses now featured tactical analyses of the Titan that made no sense to galactic science, energy readings that broke their instruments, weapon systems that operated on unknown principles, and defensive capabilities that seemed to violate the laws of physics themselves on the delegates. Minho began, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. Humanity stands at a crossroads with the galactic community. We can move forward as partners, working together for a mutual prosperity and defense against the threats that lurk in the dark spaces between stars." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Or we can chart our own course with awe, without the rest of the galaxy. The choice isn't ours to make, it's yours. How you choose to treat humanity from this point forward will determine whether we become your greatest allies or your inevitable successors," Supreme Commander Thackrose, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated, leaned forward with tentacles that trembled despite his best efforts to control them. "What do you want from us, Ambassador? What are humanity's terms?" "Simple," Minho replied. "Respect. Recognition that humanity is not some primitive species to be conquered, protected, or patronized. We are equals in this galaxy, or perhaps something more. The way you treat us going forward will determine which category we fall into." The chamber fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. For millennia, the Galactic Coalition had operated on the assumption that bigger, older, more advanced species naturally dominated smaller, younger ones. It was the natural order of things, as immutable as gravity itself. But humanity had just proven that assumptions could be deadly in the outer reaches of the solar system. The US Titan continued its patrol, its sensors sweeping space for threats, while its internal forges never stopped their work. The massive vessel was more than just a warship. It was a mobile industrial complex, capable of building anything from replacement parts to entirely new spacecraft. Every day it grew slightly larger, slightly more capable, as its AI systems refined and improved upon their own design. Captain Park had been right about humanity's greatest strength. It wasn't their technology, impressive as that had proven to be. It wasn't their weapons, devastating as they were. It was their patience, their ability to plan not in years or decades, but in centuries. While other species had fought wars over territory and resources, humanity had been quietly preparing for the day when they would emerge from their self-imposed isolation. They had watched, learned, and built in secret, letting the galaxy see only what they wanted it to see. A young species with crude technology and simple weapons, barely worth noticing. The deception had been perfect, and its success had just reshaped the balance of power in the galaxy forever. As the Titan's sensors detected movement in the asteroid, belt mining ships from 3 different species, all carefully avoiding the human vessel's patrol route, its AI systems logged another data point in the growing file labeled post-contact galactic behavior, or patterns. The galaxy was learning to give humanity the space it demanded, and that was exactly what they had planned for. Humanity had spent centuries hiding in plain sight, but those days were over. They had taken their place on the galactic stage, not as subjects or supplicants, but as masters of their own destiny. The age of human dominance had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The end asterisk.